Hey, welcome back, everyone. So, maybe you all saw the news, maybe you didn't, but Oregon is right now voting to have some of its counties, secede into Idaho. Now, they've been working on this for maybe, more than a year now. It's been going on for a while, but it now seems to be the case that it's moving forward. We'll have to see what happens with it. If this does happen, it could actually inspire some other counties of, say, red areas of blue states, or vice versa, to secede in some regards into other states that more closely fit what they view as their representative governments, whether it be conservative or more liberal. Interesting development, actually. We'll go into it a bit more. I also want to talk to you what's happening with some of the investigations right now into the 2020 elections. Also, we're going into a few other issues, folks. A lot lined up tonight, talking about Israel and Hamas making their ceasefire. Also, this commission that they've voted now to pass in the House to investigate the January 6th Capitol Hill protest. And some issues around that, folks. These stories and more, folks, we'll get into it. That said, it's good to see y'all. Yeah, good to see y'all, folks. Yeah, Gary S. Good evening, Joshua. P.S. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing good from Ontario, Canada. Thank you. Jack Delaney, good to see you as always. Hello, Josh. M5 News, Josh, I truly need your help. Please look for email. I'll check it out. Thank you. Regarding January 6th. Psylocke, he said, new camera looks high quality, Josh. Yeah, I just got a new camera. I think the beginning of this week we started using it, or Sunday. Yeah, I hope you all like the new setup. And we'll see. Maybe get higher quality from here, but I kind of like this one. So we'll see. Richard, Beth, good to see you all, folks. Good to see you all. All right, that said, as always, folks, if you have questions, comments, if you want to share anything with the audience as well, leave a chat in the comments. You have your own insights you want to share on issues we're discussing, leave them in the comments. Also, if you have questions you want to go over, leave them in the comments to try to get to them around the halfway point. And folks, again, we have now launched Epoch TV, epochtv.com/crossroads. And so, given the censorship happening on YouTube, we're still totally demonetized here, and some of the weird streaming issues we've been having. You can check us out on Epoch TV. That is their uncensored platform run by us. Everything done by us cannot be censored. And what we hope will be really the future of independent, uncensored video news. And so, folks, you want to support us. You also want just a good platform in general, some great shows. Check out epochtv.com/crossroads. And around 11:15 tonight, so about 15 minutes towards the end of the show, we're going to jump exclusively over to Epoch TV for the end of the broadcast, the last segments. And so, folks, if you have Epoch TV, if you have an Epoch Times digital subscription, please go there, check us out. We have launched our live chat feature, and so it should be up and running. We're kind of doing the final tests on it, so help us out, check it out there. And that said, folks, let's get started. All right, so first story for tonight, let's talk about what's happening with Idaho and with Oregon. Epoch Times here reports, and keep in mind, folks, this is important because if they succeed in doing this, this could actually influence other counties to do very similar things. They're already talking about doing this in some California counties as well, something very similar. And so what's happening right now with this issue happening in Oregon, if they succeed in doing this, and they've already made the first step on succeeding, if they succeed in doing this, this will be the start of what will likely be a nationwide trend in many areas, again, that don't feel they're represented by the local governments. Let's go into it. All right, Epoch Times reports, Oregon counties vote to secede into Idaho. It says here, several counties in Oregon on May 18th voted to consider joining the state of Idaho, which is part of a long-shot movement to break away from the state that has long been dominated by politicians in Portland. Portland, as I'm sure you all know, is very, very, very far left, and much of Idaho is not. Actually similar as well to, let's say, California, which in the eyes of a lot of Californians, the politics tends to get swayed mostly by San Francisco, Los Angeles, and to a degree Sacramento. A lot of the inland counties, a lot of the other counties, many of them are actually more conservative. And so what's happening here could become a trend. Let's go into a bit more. All right, it says here, Voters in Malheur, Sherman, Grant, Baker, and Lake counties, that's 5 counties, approved various measures that require county officials to take steps to look into moving the Idaho border, right? Moving the Idaho border west to incorporate the counties. Now, the grassroots movement, it's Move Oregon's Border for a Greater Idaho, is aiming to have the eastern counties, which are mostly rural, join Idaho because they believe that they'd be better off with Idaho's more conservative political leadership. And they're saying this in a quote. This is from lead petitioner Mike McCarter. He said this, quote, "This election proves that rural Oregon wants out of Oregon," and continued stating, quote, "If Oregon really believes in liberal values such as self-determination, the legislature won't hold our counties captive against our will. If we're allowed to vote for which government officials we want, we should be allowed to vote for which government we want as well." Now, again, this is tying into the broader issue that in a lot of U.S. states where typically the cities tend to be very left-leaning or very far left, like Portland, Oregon, for example, like New York City, like San Francisco and Los Angeles, where many of the more rural areas within the states tend to be more conservative. This does cause a lot of issues where you have discrepancies in terms of representation, where the cities basically dominate the politics of the state, even though many of the people within the state may not agree with those politics or have very, very different viewpoints. This is, again, the beginning of something interesting. Now, by stating liberal values here, they're using more of the classical liberal stance. Technically, classical liberalism is closer to libertarianism. The idea that you do what you want to do, I do what I want to do, I'm not going to question you for doing so. The idea of self-determination is more classical liberalism, whereas individuals who call themselves liberals these days really are more in line with the socialist or, big government kind of stance, big government way of doing things, typically, at least in terms of how it's developed. Doesn't apply to everyone, but in terms of how it's been developing. Now, they continue this, saying this. Now, McCarter told the Oregonian last year, this is when it was first starting, last year, that the bid to join Idaho is more of a lifestyle values judgment that separates rural and urban residents. Oregon's Move Oregon's Border for a Greater Idaho petitioners also want to absorb some counties in Northern California. Remember, I was talking about California also possibly doing similar things. They're talking about bringing part of California with them, folks. Let's go into a bit more. Talking about moving part of Northern California, which are also mostly rural, and some areas, again, which do tend to be more conservative, which don't believe they're represented by the typically very far left, politics happening in California right now as well. Now, on this, right? Now, the bid, however, does appear to be a long shot, as it would require a formal vote in the Democrat-controlled Oregon legislature. In other words, the state legislature in Oregon would have to vote on it, and they are more Democrat. They are more leftist, and so the chance of them agreeing to this is not as high. The chance of this actually passing is not as high, but the trend of this is what's important. Let's go explain a bit more. Now, if that goes through, if the liberal legislature chooses to vote on it, Oregon and Idaho would have to come up with a deal, which would then have to be ratified by the U.S. Congress. Throughout the history of the United States, changing state lines has been a rare occurrence, but it has happened, right? All taking place before the 20th century. In 1792, Kentucky was created for Virginia's territory. Maine was created from Massachusetts in 1820. And West Virginia in 1863 was admitted into the United States when Union states and counties separated themselves from the Confederate ones during the Civil War. Now, you also have Democrats in Congress right now trying to make the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., its own state, which is actually very similar to this as well. And so this is happening, right? This is happening. And it's going to actually pose a big issue on that note for Democrats in Congress who are trying to create District of Columbia as its own state to not allow similar rights to other counties that would wish to do something similar. if they want to justify that decision, they need to at least demonstrate that it's something done by reason and not just partisan interest. In other words, not for the interest of maintaining voting districts, maintaining what they believe would be their hold on power, essentially. That if they're going to do it, they need to come up with a better narrative than, oh, we want the votes, right? And so this is going to conflict with the Democrat plan of trying to make the District of Columbia its own state if they choose to block counties seceding in order to, again, have better representation under the same grounds, really, of better representation, which is the narrative they're pushing as well, to have the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., become, again, its own state. And the important part with that as well is there's laws, there's precedent that makes it more difficult, for example, to take the capital of the country and make it into its own state. They would actually need to create laws to allow that to happen, because technically that would not really be constitutional. And so for them to make that additional argument justifying that, they might actually have to consider giving ground to moves like this. And so this is one of the reasons why this is so significant. The other reason is this actually fits into a broader trend right now. And this is what's interesting. Again, here, folks, in Oregon and possibly some counties of Northern California, talking about seceding and becoming one with Idaho, which is a more conservative state, because they believe it would give their residents representation that they believe they're more aligned with. Now, as that is happening, this is raising the issue of whether the states within the cities are actually representing the more rural areas, of whether voters are being represented by the governments of the states. Now, as we go forward, Texas is talking about even seceding from the Union, bringing up again the deeper argument and the deeper narrative of whether, for example, the U.S. government right now is abiding by the Constitution, including, according to the Texas Declaration of Independence and its Constitution, including whether, for example, the government is recognizing the Republican form of government. And that's an important part. Are we still a republic, or have we become actually a democracy, or even further than that, a socialist state, socialist country? America, again, right, is a constitutional republic, not a democracy. And when it comes to, again, the Texas Declaration of Independence, I believe, or the Constitution, they state specifically that the grounds of them joining the Union, it must be the Constitution. They explain that specifically the grounds of them joining the Union, one of the reasons they could leave it is if the Union no longer upholds the Republican form of government. Something also mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. And so these different arguments being raised are going to raise questions, really, and start debates, really, within the United States of whether, again, we have a representative democracy, i.e., again, a republic. Now, let's go into a few more stories, folks, and we'll go to some questions for the night. But I want to go over a few more things first. Let's talk first what's happening with Israel and Hamas. Some interesting updates on this as well. Now, it says here, Epoch Times reports, it says Israel, Hamas agreed a ceasefire over Gaza conflict, according to Netanyahu's office. Netanyahu, again, being the head of Israel. Now, it says the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that officials have agreed on a ceasefire with Hamas after 11 days of fighting. A statement from his office said that his security cabinet ministers agreed to, quote, accept the Egyptian initiative for a mutual ceasefire without any conditions, which will go into effect at an hour that will be determined later. They have not determined when that will happen, but they have agreed to do it. Now, an official with Hamas, a designated terrorist group since 1997, a terrorist organization, but also the government of Palestine, told Reuters they would enter a mutual and simultaneous Gaza truce at 2 a.m. on May 21st. It came after President Joe Biden spoke to Netanyahu over the phone and urged for a ceasefire with Hamas earlier this week, according to a White House readout. Now, it's not clear whether they've agreed to this because of, again, Biden's comments, and the U.S. is one of the main supporters of Israel, or whether it was to maintain, again, this peace agreement they've made with Egypt and other regions, other countries within that region. An important part on this, though, is that Trump and other officials now are actually blaming Joe Biden for this conflict. And this is one of the arguments being raised right now, because you might remember the United States used to supply money to the Palestinian Authority, right? The government there that Hamas is in charge of, Hamas being a terrorist organization. Now, Trump had ended the U.S. payments to them. Biden restored that. That was specifically $235 million of U.S. funding to the Palestinian Authority, and that happened just last month. And so what are the chances they restore $235 million of U.S. funding to the Palestinian Authority led by a terrorist organization? And then that terrorist organization goes and starts a local conflict, which Israel responds very aggressively to. Take it for what it's worth. That was broadly reported. The Hill had it. Others had it as well. And so that's partly where the argument is now, right? Now, let's go into it a bit more, folks. I want to go briefly into what's happening with this commission to investigate the January 6th Capitol Hill protests. Then after that, we'll go into some questions and then go from there. But let's talk first what's happening right now with this House committee, this House commission that's going to investigate this, or what they're trying to push for. Epoch Times reports this. It says the U.S. House of Representatives voted late Wednesday to create an independent commission to investigate the January 6th breach of the U.S. Capitol. Now, the vote on this was 252 to 175, with all 217 Democrats in favor of the measure and 35 Republicans actually joining as well. Now, the bill now goes to the evenly divided Senate for a vote. And we'll have to see what happens. They got here again, they had 35 Republicans actually join with the Democrats to vote for this. Now, House Republicans do tend to be more, kind of not as in step, let's say, with the Republicans than the Senate Republicans are, as we saw, for example, with the votes to impeach Trump, where the House, including many Republicans within it, did choose to do that. It did choose to vote with the Democrats on that. The Senate, they're going to have a harder time with. They do need to get a higher vote percentage, again, because of the filibuster. And their chance of passing it in the Senate is actually much lower unless they can get several Republicans to vote with them. They might be able to do it, again, because they did get 35 votes from Republicans within the House. Now, let's go into a bit more. The National Commission to Investigate the January 6th Attack on the United States Complex Act, also known as H.R. 3233, is modeled after the investigation into the September 11th, 2001 attacks. In other words, folks, they plan to investigate these people who were literally waved into the building by the Capitol Police, had conversations with the Capitol Police. The only person who was killed by a Capitol Police officer, even though the media lied about doing otherwise. The lies were exposed. They plan on investigating these individuals under the same circumstances, under the same system as they investigated the September 11th terrorist attacks on the United States. Now, the proposed measure with this would create in the legislative branch, in other words, legislative branch, again, Congress, an independent 10-member commission to investigate, quote, relevant facts and circumstances related to the attack on the Capitol, and, quote, evaluate the causes of and lessons learned from this attack. Now, the commission must also submit reports of their findings alongside recommendations to, quote, improve the detection, prevention, preparedness for, and response to targeted violence and domestic terrorism, and improve the security posture of the U.S. Capitol complex. The bill would grant the commission powers such as the authority to hold hearings, receive evidence, and issue subpoenas. It also enables the commission to appoint staff. Now, you can see how this plays out, folks. They're trying to do this. Now, on this note, now a new video has emerged, which throws a wrench into the entire arguments around this. But it's very interesting. Let's go over it now. Epoch Times reports. It says here, new video shows January 6th Capitol breach suspects telling others, quote, this has to be peaceful. It also shows them talking with the Capitol Police and discussing how they're going to be peaceful, and also shows how they were led into the building. Now, it says here, a never-seen-before video from inside the U.S. Capitol building uploaded this week shows protesters speaking with Capitol police officers during the January 6th breach. The officer, who is inaudible at times, is heard telling the protesters at one point, "We're not against," and doesn't continue. It says, "You need to show us," before saying, quote, "No attacking, no assault, remain calm." This is being taken as evidence that the officers allowed the people into the building under the conditions that they did not attack anyone, they did not assault anyone, and they remained calm. Now, one of the individuals seen in the video is Jacob Chansley, also known as the Q Shaman, who faced the guy with the buffalo horns and the spear, right? Who faces charges including civil disorder, obstruction of an official proceeding, and disorderly and disruptive conduct in a restricted building. The short clip shows Chansley apparently telling other protesters that this has to be peaceful, demonstrating again their intention, bringing into question again the allegations that they went there with seditious intent. Real quick, folks, we do have a live function now. Those of you asking for Epoch TV, I just saw some chats. We do have a live chat function. If you're not getting it, you can refresh it. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. It should be there. If you're not getting it, just please refresh. Now, on this note, a bit further into this, the clip shows Chansley apparently telling protesters, again, this has to be peaceful. The video also shows another protester saying, "The police here are willing to work with us and cooperate peacefully like our First Amendment allows." Meaning that as they were allowed into the building, they were discussing with the police, and they say the police are willing to work with us and cooperate peacefully. Again, throwing a wrench into the entire narrative around this. Not to mention, again, that a lot of disinformation was used to frame this whole thing, really claiming otherwise. And also, again, the original reports were claiming that they had actually killed a Capitol police officer. That was proven to be false. That was a lie sent out by the media. Now, they said also that they wanted to, quote, peacefully discuss what needs to be done to save our country. Now, folks, a bit more on this. It's a bit wild in terms of what's happening. Again, because a lot of disinformation and the use of which is being used to push these things forward. Now, what is disinformation? Because it's important in this context. Disinformation is establishing the footnotes of arguments. Disinformation is usually falsifying original reports, which are then used for meta arguments. Let me explain. The footnotes of this are the framing originally that Trump, ordered people to basically attack the Capitol building. That was proven false. While Trump was still giving his speech on January 6th, people had already entered the Capitol building. The other argument is that, they forced their way through the barricades. There were some people who were rowdy, towards the back of the building. But again, the videos actually show that the police at the Capitol building opened the barriers and waved people in. People were even walking within these, lines and so on, walking within the kind of designated areas in many parts. Now, some people there were rowdy. One person, for example, was sitting in, the chairs. They were sitting in the chairs of different representatives and so on, not causing violence, but that was one thing they did. The narratives that were put out initially were actually false, including, again, the argument that they had killed one of the Capitol police officers. These were false stories which were used to form an overt narrative. Now, folks, the overt narrative, it's what's being used for this, the overt narrative based on false information. But the overt narrative is now what's being used to drive this forward, and people now only pay attention to the overt narrative without paying attention to the fact that many of the points used to frame that narrative were false and disproven. But again, we'll go into it a bit more. Now, an interesting point on this, the Republicans are saying they're not going to support it. And so the ability of this to actually get passed in the Senate, to actually happen in the Senate, is actually quite limited. I would say, in my analysis, based on the Republicans and their voting patterns in the Senate, the chance of this actually going through is very slim. But the Republicans are saying that they would consider pushing it through if this commission is expanded to include, for example, as well, for example, the Democrat-led, BLM protests, which many officials promoted, where you had, again, individuals like Maxine Waters calling on people to be more confrontational, where you had Democrat officials calling on people to be, to get in people's faces and things like this, while in the context, people were actually getting murdered, people were actually burning down buildings, people were carrying out looting. If you're already having burning, looting, and murdering, how do you get even more confrontational? In California, you had individuals pulling people out of their cars and beating them on the streets. How do you get more confrontational than that? And if you want to talk about officials encouraging that type of behavior and refusing to condemn that type of behavior, that looks bad on them. And so Republicans are saying that if the Democrats want to push through and create this commission, it needs to be expanded to include as well the BLM protests, the Antifa protests, and so on, which actually in their statements were seditious and so on. Now, as an important part on this, remember, folks, that seditious speech in the U.S. is actually First Amendment protected speech. You can call for the forceful overthrow of the U.S. government according to the First Amendment. This goes back to the Aliens and Sedition Act, going back to the early days of the founding, of this country, when there were laws created against seditious speech. The Supreme Court later came out and said that that was unconstitutional, meaning that free speech, including seditious speech, is allowed in the United States, meaning that even if you had officials calling for sedition, changing of our system of government, technically under previous interpretations of the Constitution, that is protected speech. Even to the point where communism calls for the forceful overthrow of all existing systems. And so technically, even individuals who call for support of communism, Marxism, BLM activists have called themselves trained Marxists. Critical race theory based on Marxism is being used for the narratives with this. Technically, folks, that by its very nature is seditious. And so if this is expanded to include the investigation into BLM and Antifa, that's going to be an interesting argument. That's where the vote is now heading as it goes to the Senate for the vote. We'll have to see what happens with it. Now, one more part on this, folks, as well. Shortly after the January 6th breach of the Capitol building, the National Guard was deployed around the Capitol building and around the White House. You had heavy troop presence in Washington. Now, the Pentagon is saying National Guard deployment at U.S. Capitol is going to end. Epoch Times reports this. It says the U.S. Department of Defense confirmed Wednesday that the National Guard mission that was set up following the January 6th Capitol breach will be discontinued on Sunday, May 23rd, this coming Sunday, folks. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby told reporters during a briefing at the Pentagon that the deployment is expected to wrap up by that date, and said, quote, "We have received no request to extend it." And he was referring again to the National Guard deployment around the Capitol and Washington. But he also said that around 2,100 National Guard troops remain around the Capitol, meaning that very likely the officials in this area do not view this as being a continuing threat, which does call into question some of the reasoning behind this. We'll have to see, folks. Now, let's go into some questions now, and then let's go into some questions. Then I want to talk about what's happening with the election integrity investigations. And folks, at the 11:15 mark, we're going to jump exclusively to Epoch TV. So we'll do the parts. We're going to do the parts on election integrity exclusively on Epoch TV. And so, folks, if you are on Epoch TV, stick with it for that. Folks, if you're not, please check out the link. Click the link. Join us on Epoch TV. That's epochtv.com/crossroads. You can check out the link in the description and in the comments. All right, that said, folks, let's jump into some questions now. All right, so first off, Melody, you said, are you going to run for office? I know you folks joke around about that a lot. I don't know. I have no plans to do so. You never know, though, right? This is from Debbie Sebring. You said, what do we do with the donor box donations? Oh, right. So, folks, many of you have been supporting us through Patreon and through DonorBox. We deeply appreciate your support. I'm not sure about donorbox if we're going to continue that. We are going to discontinue Patreon because Patreon has deplatformed people previously. We don't see a stable future with that platform. Our big concern is if these platforms choose to deplatform us, and already YouTube has totally demonetized us, and it seems to be the case that our subscriptions here are frozen and the reach of the video is frozen, and we have many people reporting a lot of issues such as not receiving alerts, such as weird buffering issues that seem to be very inconsistent. We're not seeing it on the back end, which suggests it's on the YouTube side. We're seeing a lot of very strange issues with YouTube, including very overt issues such as being totally demonetized. We don't see a future with these platforms where we can be censored. And so this is why we've established Epoch TV, again, epochtv.com/Crossroads. And folks, if you want to support us there, please support us on Epoch TV. That is the best way to support us. That's the way to support us that cannot be censored. That's a way to support us that they can't just one day go into platform us. Patreon has deplatformed people. We've seen them do it. And we don't see it as being a stable, reliable system. And so we're trying to move everything over to Epoch TV because that is stable, that is reliable. They cannot censor us there. So you can check out the link for that in the comments. This is, and folks, really genuinely appreciate your support. Really, you folks on Patreon, donorbox, you've kept this show going. And so really big thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of you as well who've supported this channel in other ways, whether it's, telling your friends or family members about it, whether it's just being here, because, again, our reach is being limited. The exposure of this channel and the success of this channel is really because of all of you. I mean, we're getting censored like in every way it seems just about they can. And so the fact that you're even here right now shows folks that it's, you all here supporting this, helping us keep this going. And again, we're not going to fold. We're not going to give in. That's why we've established Epoch TV. That is the future, again, we hope, of independent news. Let's see here. This is from Symphonic Ellen. He say, "Hey, Joshua, I love that turquoise on my shirt. Thank you." He said, "It's one of my top 3 colors that I wear. Hope you're well. Appreciate it." Yeah, thank you. This is from Yasha98. You said, made it live for the first time. You guys are awesome. Keep up the great work, and thank you from America. Yeah, doing my best. Thank you as well. Thanks for being here. This is from Ave Hagen. He said, "Thank you, Joshua. I can't quit you or Epoch Times. Joining Epoch TV. Love, appreciative viewer." Oh, thank you as well. This is from Crazy Morpto. He said, "Do you get a discount on Epoch TV if you buy a year? Do you get access to all written content as well?" Yes, you do. So it's 60% off if you get the year subscription. You do get 60% off if you get the year subscription. If you want to have access to the full digital Epoch Times, it is a bit more. But if you have a digital subscription, you do automatically get Epoch TV. And so the digital subscription does include Epoch TV. And yes, we do have the live feature there, and so we can run this fully there. This is from Neely Hetu on the January 6th Capitol breach. You said, "Will we find out what happened to Ashley Babbitt?" So, folks, there was one person killed on January 6th. Other people died. They died of natural causes such as heart attack, health problems. 4, I think, died total, or 5 died total, including Ashley Babbitt. Ashley Babbitt was the only one killed by violence, and violence very likely caused unnecessarily. Ashley Babbitt was the woman shot in the neck by a Capitol police officer as she was climbing through a broken window in the Capitol building. Now, again, videos show that individuals broke the window, behaved very strangely, and then went down the stairs, changed their clothes, while you had multiple police officers, including some who were heavily armed, walking up the stairs right there. There were at least 2 to 3 officers standing right next to that window and 2 to 3 heavily armed officers on the stairs right behind her. In other words, folks, you had 5 to 6 police officers right next to Ashley Babbitt as she was shot almost point blank in the neck by an officer on the other side of the building. She was unarmed. she was killed in a way that if this was on the other side, there'd probably be people burning down buildings and looting stores and calling for this individual to basically be lynched right now, right, under the guise of justice, as we've been seeing, if the tables were turned. Now, will we see what actually happened with this? Maybe not, because the folks in charge are not revealing who this officer was, although independent investigations by netizens have found evidence on who the individual might be, this Capitol Police officer. At the same time, though, the family of Ashley Babbitt is trying to press charges. They're trying to sue, and we'll have to see where it goes with this, including, for example, looking into this. Now, we'll have to see where this goes, folks. The other big part of it, one of the ironic parts of this, is that part of the investigation, if there were to be an investigation into the Capitol siege as they're calling it, really the walkthrough of the Capitol building, one of the big parts of this was the fact that, again, the officials there turned down Donald Trump's offers for additional security, turned down Donald Trump's offers to, bring protection there. And you had individuals there, police, open the barriers and so on. Who gave those orders to turn down again the deployment of the National Guard? Who gave those orders to allow them into the building while Trump was still giving his speech? What was happening with security at the Capitol building if they claimed to have been as afraid for their lives as they were, these officials? Now, that would actually go possibly to the Speaker of the House, Pelosi, and to a couple others. And if you have individuals who technically, within the framework of this commission that they're proposing, should themselves be subjects of investigation, at least in terms of how they decided policy should have been done and how they decided security policy, how do you have individuals who should technically be subject of investigation trying to run the investigation? That's one of the big concerns with this commission. That, again, it's kind of like a individual, who is a suspect of, a light suspect within a crime, choosing to themselves form a commission to investigate the crime, which they themselves have a part to play in, right? They themselves are at the very least, let's say, an interest group within this. They themselves are a party that was targeted by this. How do you have an individual launch an investigation under something which you have a personal interest in, that, again, you have special interest within? If this was a jury, they'd be kicked out of the courtroom by the judge, right? If this was a jury and they have personal vested interests in it because they were, again, part of it on the security side and with the target of it, how do they investigate themselves? That's one of the big issues you're going to have raised with this, right? And again, Trump's been calling it basically a witch hunt this whole time because it's kind of what it is, right? Now, folks, that said, let's go over a couple more questions and then we'll go into election integrity exclusively on Epoch TV. This is from Greg Carson. He said, Joshua, any chance that eventually Epoch TV might have designated reporting for each state? So many states have local state issues that never make national news, but often are duplicated to other states. I have some updates on this. Example in Oregon, where the governor gave the Portland front for the Chinese Tong Association at least $150,000 for what seemed to be just publicity for their group. So, folks, if you haven't seen it yet, Epoch Times actually did put out a job offer list where we are hiring reporters across the United States in all the different states. And so to answer your question, yes, we are working on bringing on new shows, but specifically we're also looking to hire journalists locally across the United States right now. So folks, actually, if any of you are looking for work as a journalist, or you know someone who's looking for work as a journalist, have some experience or can give writing samples, check out the epochtimes.com where we have the job offer up, or get in touch with our office email. We are hiring. We're specifically hiring local reporters right now, specifically on what you asked about. And we are looking to cover a lot of the issues that don't get any attention basically in the U.S. right now. Shooting Comet 123 said, does Epoch TV have Roku app or Fire TV support? I'm not sure right now if we have Roku or Fire TV. I can get back to you on that. We are on cable. We actually just launched cable and we're expanding cable. And so we are working on this. If you're in the UK, for example, we're on Sky News. We broadcast through Sky News. We're looking to really establish this, folks, as a TV channel and really, really trying to remake, again, the way that TV news is done, the way that video news is done, and really trying to do what we've done for written news, which is bring integrity back to it. All right, folks, let's see here. Any other questions? And then we'll jump to Epoch TV for the election integrity stories. I'll tell you what, let's do the first part of this here at 11:15 Eastern time. In about 5 minutes, we'll jump to Epoch TV. But let's do the first part of the story here. Let's talk first about what's happening in Pennsylvania. Now, Epoch Times reports this. It says, mostly Republican ballots fail to scan in Pennsylvania county election, stoking concerns. You hear that, folks? Ballots that just happen to be mostly Republican are not scanning. Let's go into it. It says a number of ballots would not scan during an election this week in a southwestern Pennsylvania county, triggering fresh concerns about election integrity. The ballots, mostly from Republican voters in Fayette County, were missing barcodes that typically help facilitate the scanning. This was actually something you saw happen in the 2020 elections as well, where counties, mostly conservative counties, were reporting issues like this, which was interpreted as voting suppression of specific counties that do tend to lean more heavily in the conservative direction, which was one of the many points of evidence used to suggest that some weird stuff happened during the election, which made people really concerned about whether we had an honest election. Let's go into it. Representative Matthew Dowling, a Republican, told the Epoch Times this. He said, what we know at this point in time is that a barcode that's required to allow the paper ballots to be scanned at the polling places was missing. Why was that missing? That's where the question is right now. Now, George Rade, the chairman of the Fayette County Democratic Party, was present when the issues started around 7 p.m. on Tuesday night. He recalled that nobody initially knew what the problem was. He and others went to the County Bureau of Elections and found it was a barcode issue. It says here, quote, the majority of them were Republican ballots. And he told this to the Epoch Times. A bureau spokeswoman declined to comment on the matter, citing an ongoing investigation, and a recount was taking place as of Thursday, i.e. as of today. Now, the county said in a statement that the Bureau identified and was addressing a, quote, printing issue with some of the primary election ballots, and that the issue was affecting all parties. They're claiming, again, this was affecting Democrats as well. The issue, again, they're saying it affected more Republicans, is that it seemed to have targeted specifically a Republican majority area. Now, this does tie into the broader issue happening right now, where whether it's Arizona, whether it's Georgia, whether it's other key swing states that reported, where you had reporting on a lot of these strange issues that happened in the 2020 elections, Maricopa County, Arizona, for example, which did swing the elections in these key states, which led to Biden being elected president. A lot of these issues are, of course, raising concerns among voters. A lot of these issues are being, called out by local representatives. Now, in many states, you do have talks or the moving forward of audits, Arizona being the biggest one, other states now talking about following it. Now, the important part with that, people have been asking, well, will it actually overturn the election? We'll have to see. Trump, if it were to happen, would have to not only prove that it happened each state, the audits could prove that if they move forward, but would have to demonstrate that he lost enough electoral college votes that would have swung the election, and then we'll have to see what happens from there. That's essentially where things are at. Now, folks, that said, we're going to jump over to Epoch TV now. Again, it's 11:15 Eastern time mark. Again, we're testing out our new live chat feature. It should be working just fine. Folks, if you have Epoch TV, if you have a digital subscription to Epoch Times, please go to epochtv.com/crossroads, or if you want a subscription, check us out. We're going to go over the rest of these stories there. And folks, again, if you want to support us going forward, please consider subscribing. It really helps us. And again, this is what's keeping us going. See you on Epoch TV, folks. It seems like there's an increase in homelessness. Is there really an increase in homelessness, or are we just seeing it more? What's happening in this country?
We are seeing it more, and there absolutely is an increase. So in 2020, new data came out from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that showed an over 16% increase in the last decade in homelessness.
What was the catalyst that led to this increase in homelessness?
When you look at the reasons behind it, it all leads to a new policy that, or a policy, I should say, that the Obama administration took, a policy that HUD was using for the chronically street homeless in 2008, and they took it and rolled it out as a one-size-fits-all solution for the homeless population.
All right.